A lonely CEO who hadn't smiled in 12 years discovered an incredible secret from his maid that triggered a moral dilemma that could shatter his empire. Jacob Harris sat in his dimly lit office, the glow of multiple screens casting a cold light over his worn face. Each day bled into the next. Board meetings, profit margins, and the relentless pursuit of success swallowed his existence whole. He hadn't smiled in so long that the act felt like a distant memory, a relic from a life where laughter and warmth thrived. In its place, loneliness settled deep, festering in the corners of his soul. Sparse family photos adorned the edges of his desk, covered in dust as thick as his own regrets. Maria, his dedicated maid, moved quietly through his home, dusting shelves that had long been neglected. She was a fixture in his otherwise desolate existence, a blend of light and labor that kept the shadows at bay. One day, while rummaging through the attic, she stumbled upon an old album. Its leather cover cracked, but filled with possibilities. As she turned the pages, images of Jacob's past unfolded like the petals of a forgotten flower. Joyful family gatherings, vacations where smiles were genuine, and moments captured in time before ambition devoured his spirit. "Mr. Harris," she called gently, her voice piercing through the quiet. He hesitated, torn between the harsh clamor of corporate demands and the whispering pull of nostalgia. Maria presented the album, urging him to look and remember. Tension gnawed at him as he sifted through the pages, unearthed emotions clashing within. Each photograph peeled back layers of his meticulously constructed facade. A flash of laughter, a sense of belonging, things he had forfeited for power and profit. He felt the weight of guilt creeping in. Was this the man he had become? Money had coiled around his heart and squeezed away joy, leaving only a hollow core. Just then, Maria shared insights about her struggles, weaving them into her own narrative of resilience and quiet triumph. Jacob listened, vulnerability sparking connectivity where solitude had reigned. What was real success if one was isolated, standing atop a mountain of wealth that brought them no happiness? The revelation shattered him, stirring a longing to reconnect with a family he had pushed away in pursuit of empty accolades. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. But the serenity was shattered when news of internal betrayal erupted. Figures once loyal now rose against him, revealing the rotten core of his empire. The foundation he built began to crumble beneath his feet, and with that ruin loomed a moral dilemma: to retaliate with the fierce ruthlessness he'd mastered, or embrace the empathy Maria had awakened within him. As he prepared for the critical board meeting, his heart raced. The stakes had never been higher. The glimmer of a brighter future flickered before him, yet the shadows of his past loomed larger. Desperation clawed at his mind. Could one act of integrity redefine his life? He glanced at the family photos, yearning for connection, battling between the person he was and the man he longed to be. Just as clarity began to cut through the fog, Maria paused, her words halting him cold. A revelation about familial ties, one that would change everything. Jacob stood at a precipice, each breath heavy with the inevitability of his choice. What path would he take, and at what cost? In the silence that followed Maria's revelation, Jacob felt a crack in his armor, a vulnerability spreading through him like wildfire. Her words lingered in the air, charged with a truth that struck deeper than any business strategy he had ever devised. Familial ties can be treacherous, she had implied, but they also hold the promise of redemption, a bridge back to humanity that he had long abandoned. As the board meeting loomed closer, the specter of betrayal hung heavy in his mind. He recalled the faces of those who had turned against him, once allies, now engulfed in deceit. This newly unfolded layer of personal conflict rattled him. Could he truly confront them with integrity? Would doing so jeopardize the very empire he had fought tooth and nail to erect? Sitting at the edge of his desk, he closed his eyes, blocking out the hypnotic glow of screens that offered no solace. In their flickering light, memories of laughter echoed, almost mocking him. His mind raced through the pathways of his past, the missed birthdays, the late nights at the office while his family craved his presence. He had sacrificed so much for an empire that felt increasingly fragile. Driven by something deeper than fear, Jacob pulled himself from his despair, steeling his resolve. If Maria's struggles could ignite hope, then perhaps emerging from this current inflection point required not a knee-jerk reaction, but a deliberate maneuver to address his specters both within and without. With a sudden clarity, he drafted an agenda for the meeting. Instead of attacking those who had betrayed him, he chose to open the floor, to invite discussion and transparency. The thought unsettled him. Vulnerability was anathema to the aggressive business style he had cultivated. Nevertheless, it felt like the only route to salvaging the remnants of his empire while realigning with the man he wanted to become. As he looked back at the family album, one photograph drew his attention. It was a candid shot taken during his daughter's 5th birthday, her face illuminated with pure joy. The sense of shame stung him like another. What path would he take, and at what cost? A longing washed over him like a tide. He felt the urge to reconcile with the family he had neglected, to reclaim not just his connection to them, but a part of himself he had long buried. Could opening a line of communication ease the chasm his ambition had created? The hour of the board meeting arrived, tension thick in the air. With each step toward the conference room, his heart surged with doubt and determination. Walking into that room was like stepping into a battlefield. He positioned himself at the head of the table, mind racing as he spotted familiar faces, their expressions a mix of guilt and concealed hostility. "Before we begin," Jacob cleared his throat, adrenaline coursing through him, "I want to address our current situation directly." The moment hung, charged with unspoken revelations. The anticipated dogfight of blame and defense transformed into something more, a chance for reconciliation, a new approach. He caught a glimpse of Maria outside the window, her presence grounding him as he steeled himself to speak from the heart. "I've realized that true strength lies in how we handle adversity together, not how we rise above it at the expense of others." As he articulated his thoughts, Jacob felt chains breaking, the weight on his shoulders lifting. Speech by speech, he navigated the conversation toward collaboration, shifting from the fear of retaliation to the power of unity. What began as a confrontation evolved into building bridges, a lesson from Maria deeply etched in his mind. Yet, lurking beneath that fragile hope, whispers of doubt clung close. Would his newfound stance earn him respect or further scorn? How long before the wounds of betrayal festered anew? As the meeting adjourned, uncertainty clung to him like a persistent shadow. Outside, the sun threatened to break through the clouds. Just as he felt a flicker of hope spark within, he received a message, a chilling ultimatum from one of his erstwhile allies, threatening to expose weaknesses in his leadership should he falter in their upcoming discussions. With that revelation, Jacob knew his path had taken a sharp turn. Choices awaited, and drama was far from over. The true test of his integrity lay just ahead, and he would soon find out whether change could indeed reset the course of his shattered empire. Would he risk it all for authenticity, or entrench himself in the familiar ruthlessness that built it? The clock was ticking, and the moment to decide was upon him. Jacob sat in his office, the sunlight pouring through the large windows, yet failing to illuminate the shadows that clung to him. The ultimatum had arrived like a thunderstorm, and he felt disoriented, his analytical mind racing to determine a strategy. It was dizzying. The very people he had trusted were now ready to dismantle everything he had built, and the fractures in their relationships mirrored the cracks in his empire. He glanced at his phone again. The message had become a fixation, each notification sound an unwelcome reminder that the stakes were rising. His heart raced with the weight of impending decisions. Would he conform to the cutthroat methods that had brought him success, or would he forge a new path grounded in transparency and authenticity? Unsure, he made his way to the nearby cafe, hoping the hum of the bustling environment might drown out the turmoil within. He ordered a coffee, leaning against the counter, watching as baristas skillfully crafted drinks for the morning crowd. A family rushed in, children laughing, parents frazzled but smiling. His chest tightened as he observed them, an ache resonating deep in his core. Their joy was the parallel to his neglect, a stark reminder of the family moments he had sacrificed. As he sat outside, coffee steaming, he caught sight of Maria, her face illuminated with determination. She was out on her daily run, an embodiment of resilience that drew him in. He waved, inviting her to join him. "Everything all right, Jacob?" she asked, settling across from him, her energy enveloping the table. "Just negotiating with my past," he admitted, his voice heavy with vulnerability. Maria tilted her head, her curiosity piqued. "You've shifted the narrative with your board. That's not easy." "I opened the conversation," he confessed, avoiding her gaze. "But now I'm left scrambling beneath the weight of betrayal. I feel transparent, and it scares me." "You're not just a CEO. You're someone with ties that matter," she replied, her eyes glancing toward the dining families. "Have you thought about how your openness could affect them?" Jacob remembered the tension in the meeting room, the shifting demeanor of those who once shielded him with loyalty. He colored his words with anger, desperation. "They want my downfall, and it feels like I'm standing alone in this." Maria's face softened. "You aren't alone. Sometimes we need to walk through the fire of honesty to see who is left." Her words seeped into his mind, planting seeds of contemplation. He had lived in a fortress of solitude, erecting walls against both deceit and vulnerability. But maybe it was time to engage with the honesty that had eluded him. Perhaps through risk lay the possibility of true connection, not just with his board, but within the fabric of his family. Resolved, he envisioned a parallel discussion that didn't merely encompass betrayal, but also encompassed the human connections he had drifted from. It was a risk, but one he needed to embrace. Decisions pounded within him like a drum. As they parted ways, a lightness settled around him, though doubt still loomed. He returned to the office, determination fueling his steps. He would not shy away from confrontation. Instead, he would employ it to weave transparency into the fabric of his leadership. Yet, even as he prepared, the challenge of the ultimatum loomed over him. An emergency board meeting was called in less than 24 hours, and Jacob would need to navigate the storm with both steel resolve and an open heart. With every decision swaying between risk and reward, he felt the tug of change envelop him. Just as he glimpsed a path forward, an unexpected email lit up his screen, a cryptic message from the same ally threatening to expose his vulnerabilities. And there it was again, the chilling ultimatum rearing its head. With adrenaline suffusing his veins, Jacob couldn't ignore the question that loomed with an urgency he had not felt in years. Would he confront this enemy head-on, or would he fall prey to the darkness of his past decisions? As he sat at his desk, poised to respond, everything he had worked for hung in the balance. He inhaled deeply, fingers hovering over the keyboard. The next move might shift not just his empire, but the very fabric of who he was becoming. Time was running out, and the moment of truth beckoned closer than ever. But how much would he be willing to expose of himself? The quiet hum of his office turned into a cacophony of tension, each ticking clock echoing Jacob's escalating anxiety. He hesitated for a moment. Emails piled up like unresolved questions, but his mind was only on the ultimatum. He knew the weight of this decision would ripple beyond mere business repercussions. It was a personal crossroads that could define who he was to become. As he clicked open the ominous email, his pulse quickened. The words slithered onto his screen. Your weaknesses are known. This is your chance to reclaim what's yours, but what are you willing to sacrifice? A chill swept through him. He felt exposed, like a marionette tangled in its own strings, caught between pulling them tight or loosening the tension to find freedom. Responding to threats had always felt instinctual, defensive, calculated, strategic. But the call for confrontation demanded more than mere tactics. It required introspection. Would sending an aggressive rebuttal be in line with the authentic leader he aspired to become, or would it hurl him back into the shadows of his older self, the one who thrived in darkness? He exhaled, shaking out the nerves. The barista's steady hands from earlier floated into his mind, so deft, so purposeful. Jacob recognized a lesson hidden within that seemingly mundane activity: focus. In cooking, as in leadership, simplicity often birthed the best results. What if he acknowledged his vulnerability instead of retaliating? The very response he was about to craft could either fortify or unravel his visions of transparency. He stood up, the need for movement surging through him, pressing down with urgency. He paced around his office, contemplating both the message and the implications of a measured response. As he walked the perimeter, his mind flickered toward Maria's words. What if he could channel the courage she embodied? Her determination inspired change, precisely what he required now more than ever. He needed to confront not just the email sender, a phantom haunting his professional life, but also his deeper fears of inadequacy and isolation that stemmed from neglecting. Personal connections. Jacob returned to his desk, fingers sparking to life over the keyboard as he composed an email that countered the threat, yes, but which also laid bare his human side. I'm aware that I have room to grow, he typed, his heartbeat driving the rhythm of each keystroke. I welcome transparency. It's pivotal for the future I wish to build. Every line poured honesty onto the virtual page. The admission was liberating, an acknowledgement of his past flaws and a declaration of his willingness to change. He didn't know how his board would react to his newfound mindset, but laying bare his vulnerabilities would strengthen rather than weaken his position. After hitting send, Jacob leaned back in his chair, a rush of conflicting emotions cascading down his spine. This felt new, the act of revealing oneself. Even amid the storm, as trepidation loomed, he felt a flicker of hope stimulate his core. He wasn't merely fighting against betrayal, he was choosing to invest in authenticity. His phone lit up once more, pulling him from reflection. It was a new notification, but this time it was from his family, an unexpected message from his daughter. "Dad, can you come to the park tomorrow? I miss you." That simple note cut through layers of his internal struggles like a beacon, illuminating a path towards reconnection he'd alienated. Perhaps it wasn't only the corporate world he needed to confront. Lifting the weight of his corporate battles could very well embolden him to face his personal connections too. As possibilities flickered in his mind, he leaned forward toward his desk again, energized. A cascading thought emerged. Would stepping into vulnerability with his family yield a chance to rewrite the narrative that had dictated years of emotional absence? Craving that dialogue, two roads lay before him, one still shrouded in obscurity, the board meeting ahead, and the other, a personal encounter with his daughter, that could prove as challenging as rearranging a business relationship. Both were tests of courage, fidelity to himself, and the rebuilding of trust. It dawned on Jacob that these personal confrontations could be the very catalysts for transformation he sought. Before he could dwell too long on the future, a methodical resolve surged. He would start by reaching out to his daughter and follow through on the honesty he had unleashed. He would orchestrate these conversations using a principles-driven approach, both professionally and personally. Yet in the back of his mind, the specter of that email still loomed, waiting to be addressed, and Jacob felt the weight of urgency pull at him. The time had come, not just to face those who opposed him in business, but also to carve his path toward authentic relationships that he had long cast aside. And perhaps, just perhaps, each dialogue held the key that would unlock a different outcome than he had ever imagined. But first, the board meeting awaited, and in that moment, he realized his greatest challenge was yet to come. Would the culmination of his transformations be enough to withstand the gale he was stepping into? Jacob woke up the next morning with a heavy heart. The hour was early, and the light barely crept into his room, mirroring the uncertainty clouding his mind. He had emailed the board, but adrenaline mixed with anticipation buzzed in his veins. He recognized the weight of the day ahead, 2 imminent confrontations, one with his professional peers and another with his daughter. As he washed his face and stared at his reflection, he searched for conviction in his eyes. Had he transformed enough to yield results, or was he merely postponing the inevitable clash with his old habits? He took a deep breath and reminded himself of the tenets he aimed to uphold: authenticity, vulnerability, and courage. These were no longer mere slogans, but a framework he needed to embody in the face of his challenges. At breakfast, he sat quietly across from his wife, who'd stationed herself at the kitchen table, eyes glued to her phone. It felt as if a tangible distance stretched between them, a silent acknowledgement of the growing chasm that sorted their lives apart. Hesitant to engage, he opened his mouth to share his plans for the day, but the words clogged in his throat. What would he even say? "I'm confronting the board about my weaknesses, and then I'm meeting our daughter to repair the damage I've done." As he left the house, a storm brewed metaphorically and literally. Dark clouds loomed overhead, promising an internal and external tempest. The boardroom was cold and stark, lit by fluorescent lights that stripped warmth from the atmosphere. Jacob entered, feeling his resolve clash with the tangible apprehension of what lay ahead. He could hear muffled conversations, the chatter mixing with his thoughts. Would they accept his newfound path or twist it into a weapon against him? As he settled into his seat, he rehearsed his opening statement mentally. "I acknowledge past shortcomings," he would say. The phrase felt inadequate, too flat against the backdrop of fear and expectation. But in that moment, recalling the barista's steadiness, he adjusted his posture to reclaim his confidence. The meeting started, and one by one, board members launched into a discussion framed by skepticism and guarded uncertainty. Jacob's heart leaped when the chairwoman's question directed at him clawed through the noise. "Jacob, how do you plan to move forward with transparency if we can't trust your abilities?" Their eyes were sharp as they fixated on him, ready to pounce on any misstep. A surge of adrenaline kicked in, but instead of cowering or retaliating defensively, he leaned in. "Trust is built through honesty," he asserted, feeling the words firm up under scrutiny. "I stand before you not to erase my mistakes, but to learn openly from them, and to foster an environment where we all have room to grow. Authenticity begins with confronting the truth." Surprisingly, the board listened. Murmurs of agreement, albeit hesitant, nudged between the rigid silence. Jacob could see that acknowledging his vulnerabilities had softened their guarded demeanor, if only slightly. Yet, as the meeting progressed, he discerned pockets of opposition among the members. Some still clung to their skepticism, unwilling to grant him even a thread of grace. A sharp jab from a long-standing board member cut into his confidence. "Let's face it, Jacob, you're using this transparency to disguise your failures." The accusation hung in the air like an anchor, a swift reminder of the lurking shadows of his past. But the trust he had started to forge urged him on. "Perhaps I am," he responded carefully, "but I see failure as part of growth. To deny that is to deny myself." Each word regained a measure of potency, but they were not enough to quell the rising tide of uncertainty. His heart pounded in anticipation for the next meeting, the one he could almost feel biting at his heels. A meeting with his daughter after years of missing her milestones. What would he say to her? The thought of facing her yet again punctured him with uneasiness, but at the same time it lit a spark of hope. He knew this encounter would require a layer of vulnerability deeper than anything he had faced so far, a test of everything he had embraced as a leader and as a father. As he exited the boardroom, he felt the weight of both outcomes hovering over him. Would he discover the strength to bridge the emotional divide with his daughter as he had begun to do in the boardroom? Each step toward the park felt monumental, as if he were walking into an uncharted territory fraught with both peril and possibility. And with that, uncertainty edged forward. The impending moment loomed like a gathering storm, ready to unleash its ferocity. Would his transformation withstand the test of reconnecting with the daughter he had left behind, or would past grievances drown any potential for a new beginning? Jacob approached the park gates, the iron bars towering like the walls of his own making. He hesitated at the threshold, taking in the bright green of the grass, the laughter of children at play, all things that felt painfully foreign to him. This was a world he had neglected for too long. Lines of worry etched deeper into his frame as memories of past failed attempts to connect with his daughter flashed through his mind. What if she didn't want to see him? What if the years spent apart had created an insurmountable gap? He clenched his fists, searching for calm in the storm of emotions. There was a time when he could easily dismiss these feelings, label them as weaknesses, but now he recognized them as the very essence of being human. Unfiltered vulnerability was the catalyst for true connection, wasn't it? "Stay present," he murmured, forcing the mantra through gritted teeth as he stepped onto the manicured path. Each footfall felt heavier than the last, reverberating with doubts that threatened to pull him under. The smell of freshly cut grass mixed with the sweet scent of blooming flowers, a stark contrast to the sterile atmosphere of corporate boardrooms. This softer environment forced him to grapple with the raw emotional landscape of being a father, a title he had neglected as much as his daughter's need for him. He spotted her sitting on a bench, fingers flying across the screen of her phone without a care for the world around her. A wave of affection washed over him, intertwining with an ache that cut deep. It was her, the little girl he used to know, now transformed into a young woman. She wore headphones, clearly lost in her own universe. Taking a deep breath, he approached cautiously, uncertain of the reception awaiting him. The closer he got, the more he questioned whether he should speak or wait for her to notice him. A moment of spontaneity surged within him, a brief impulse to call her name before he lost the courage. "Emily?" The word tumbled from his lips, sounding out of place amidst the joyful chaos of the park. Her gaze lifted, barely meeting his eyes before flicking back down. The pause stretched uncomfortably, each passing second thickening the air with unresolved tension. He could almost hear her internal dialogues, filled with confusion, anger, or worse, indifference. "Dad?" Her voice was barely above a whisper, tinged with disbelief. He noticed her fingers stilled, the phone lowering only marginally but not entirely. The use of that name sent shivers down his spine, a reminder that their past was still very much alive, buried beneath layers of disappointment. "Can I sit?" he asked, his voice trembling with a mixture of hope and dread. "Sure," she replied mechanically, a word devoid of the warmth it could have held. As he settled onto the bench, he faced her directly, taking in the way she seemed to retreat even further within herself. Silence filled the space between them, heavy with unspoken words. Jacob knew that small talk would be meaningless, so he forged ahead, carving a path through the discomfort. "I've thought about you every day," he began, brave enough to unveil his truth. "I'm here because I want to listen." Her eyes finally met his, but nothing prepared him for the reflection of the hurt he saw. Listen? Is that all you want? To listen? Where were you all those years? Each word resonated with a blend of pain and accusation, puncturing his facade of confidence. The intensity of her gaze stole his breath. He could feel the years wasted between them, the guilt hardening in his chest. Yet something compelled him to respond, to fight for this moment, to fight for her. "You're right," he said, each word escaping his lips heavy with sincerity. "I was lost in my own world, making excuses. I didn't take the time to be present for you, and I can't change the past, but I want to make it right moving forward." Her eyes finally met his, but nothing prepared him for the reflection of the hurt he saw. "Listen? Is that all you want? To listen? Where were you all those years?" Each word resonated with a blend of pain and accusation, puncturing his facade of confidence. The intensity of her gaze stole his breath. He could feel the years wasted between them, the guilt hardening in his chest. Yet something compelled him to respond, to fight for this moment, to fight for her. "You're right," he said, each word escaping his lips heavy with sincerity. "I was lost in my own world, making excuses. I didn't take the time to be present for you, and I can't change the past, but I want to make it right moving forward." He saw glimpses of shock flit across her face, a fleeting fragility that he had never witnessed before. It ignited a flicker of hope. Maybe this was the beginning of a conversation that could lead somewhere, a chance he had thought was beyond his reach. Yet Emily's expression tightened again, her defenses reasserting themselves like armor. "You think an apology is all it takes?" she shot back, her walls rising with each passing second. With every hurdle she placed between them, Jacob felt the weight of the years pressing heavily on his chest. He had stepped into unknown territory where there were no guarantees or shortcuts. "I know that it's not," he admitted, "but if you let me, I'm willing to try. Can we talk?" They were two souls on a precipice, balancing between reconciliation and rebuff. Jacob's heart raced, not just with fear and anxiety, but finally with a flame of determination. It was high time for the first real conversation, a raw unveiling of their truths. And as he readied himself for whatever came next, he couldn't help but wonder, would Emily take a step forward or retreat deeper into silence? A moment of reckoning was unfolding, and the stakes had never been higher. The weight of Emily's silence hung in the air, a palpable presence that threatened to suffocate Jacob. Facing the embodiment of his past mistakes was daunting enough. The possibility that she might reject him again felt like a full Nelson grip on his chest. But there was no turning back now. He studied her, the contours of her face illuminated by filtered sunlight. The anger that had once been directed at him now seemed to ripple beneath the surface like wild waves beneath a calm sea. That realization cut sharper than any accusation. He was her father, a role he had chosen to sidestep for years, while she had grown into a young woman carrying the weight of his absence. "Emily, I know I've hurt you," he began, the tremor in his voice betraying his resolve. "All those years, I thought chasing success mattered more than being present in your life. I was wrong." Her response was immediate, a flicker of irritation dancing in her eyes. "Wrong doesn't even begin to cover it," she countered, each word laced with frustration. "You were never there when I needed you most. You made choices for your career instead of choosing to be a dad." The accusation sliced through him, raw and unfiltered. He had grown adept at navigating boardroom confrontations, but facing his daughter required an entirely different skill set, one that eluded him. Carl, his unwavering confidant from the office, had cautioned him time and again, authenticity breeds connection. Yet here he was, struggling to connect with the one person his heart yearned for. "I don't expect you to forgive me," he said, forcing down the wave of shame rising in his throat. "But I want to show you that I can change. I can be the father you deserve." "There's more to being a father than just showing up once in a while," she shot back, crossing her arms defensively, an obvious signal of her skepticism. "You think this is enough? That I'll simply welcome you back because you're finally here?" He winced at her rejection. The vulnerability he thought might soften her heart seemed to have blindfolded her reason instead. Perhaps he had spent too long wearing the mask of the successful CEO, where showing weakness was tantamount to failure. And yet, as he sat there on the bench, the reality of fatherhood felt more daunting than any business negotiation he had faced. "I know it's a huge ask," he admitted, searching for the right words, "but I'm here now, and I want to rebuild what we lost. I've spent a lifetime avoiding uncomfortable conversations, but that ends here. Can you help me understand the person you've become?" Her gaze faltered, the wall between them cracking just enough for him to see the flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. "You really want to understand?" she asked, her tone wavering, the challenge hanging between them. "Yes, I do," he insisted, the urgency of the moment pulling him forward. "I want to know your dreams, your fears. I want to hear about your life, even if it's painful. I want to listen to all of it." Sunlight filtered through the trees, casting dappled shadows across her face as she weighed his offer. The tension between them softened just slightly, and Jacob sensed an opening, an unexpected glimmer of hope. "Well," she shrugged, her voice quieter now, "the last time anyone asked me to talk about myself was never, I guess." "Then let's change that," he suggested, offering her a sincere smile that felt as if it had been carved from a stone monument. "Tell me about your life. Tell me about everything. I need to know you, Emily." As his words hung in the air, a palpable shift transformed the atmosphere. Her eyes mirrored a blend of skepticism and curiosity. Maybe the chasm between them wasn't as insurmountable as he believed. Perhaps, just maybe, their conversation could venture into the territory of healing. Yet, as she opened her mouth, hesitating between trust and doubt, Jacob braced himself for the response. Would her heart open just a little, or would she pull back once more, fortified by the armor of disbelief? The moment lingered, fraught with potential, a doorway to understanding that both excited and terrified him. And beneath it lay the undeniable truth. With each word spoken, they both walked a tightrope of revelation, teetering between connection and estrangement. "Fine," she finally said, the resolve in her voice hardening like a newly forged blade. "If you really want to listen, I'll tell you. But don't expect it to be easy." Jacob nodded, adrenaline coursing through his veins as he prepared to enter bumpy, uncharted territory. With every truth unveiled, he knew they shaped a future framed by both shadows of the past and the possibility of forgiveness, and redemption lay on the other side. But as Emily began to speak, he wondered if he was truly ready to face what she was about to unveil, and what revelations about himself might surface in the process. The moment of truth had arrived, and everything hung in the balance. Jacob's heart raced, not only from the intensity of Emily's words, but from the realization that he stood on fragile ground. As she took a breath, her eyes flickering with a mixture of trepidation and resolve, he braced himself for an emotional deluge. "I was always the kid who sat alone in the cafeteria," she began, her voice quiet but firm. "It didn't matter how many friends people thought I had. They didn't really know me. It was just easier to be invisible." Each word she uttered struck a nerve, peeling back layers of guilt he had buried deep within. During his relentless pursuit of success, he had ignored the very existence of a daughter who yearned for attention, affection, and recognition. Now, as he listened, her voice resonated with hurt he had instigated. "I remember the school plays," she continued, her gaze shifting to the ground. "I always looked for you in the audience, but you never came. I never understood why work was more important than being there for me. It felt like I wasn't worth the effort. He could feel the weight of her disappointment envelop him like a shroud. The conversations he had mastered in boardrooms now felt devoid of meaning. He was paralyzed, staring into an abyss of regret. "Emily, he began, but the words caught in his throat. Her expression shifted, a flicker of anger reigniting. "You don't get to interrupt. I need you to understand how it felt. You were always too busy with your meetings and calls. I spent years questioning my worth." Silence surrounded them, amplifying the tension as he wrestled with emotions. How could he have been so blind? His ambitions had cost him everything. "But I can't let that define me now," she asserted, lifting her chin defiantly as if reclaiming her power. "I went to therapy. I found ways to cope. I learned to validate myself without you." A surge of admiration coursed through Jacob. The girl who had thrived in his absence had found her voice, her strength. He couldn't ignore the undeniable truth. Emily had faced her demons, while he had chosen to escape into work, evading the true struggle that was his family. "And now?" he asked softly, "is it too late for me?" For the first time, he detected a flicker of empathy in her gaze. "You keep saying you want to listen and understand, but do you mean it? This isn't just a conversation to tick a box for you." Her directness caught him off guard. Perhaps this was a moment to display the authenticity he had learned about in business, but had never truly. "I want this to change," he affirmed, steadying his voice. "I want to be part of your life, not just for now, but for the future. I don't want to be the father who only shows up when it's convenient." Emily's shoulders were squared, the tension lingering, but he could sense a shift, the possibility of reconciliation hovering in the air between them. All at once she sighed, the weight of her emotions crashing down like a wave. "Don't think I'll ever forget," she warned softly, a reminder laced with both anger and sadness. "But maybe you can change." He felt a mixture of hope and anxiety buoying within him. Could he truly evolve into the father she needed? He'd spent so much time meticulously crafting a professional identity, but could he weave the same precision into personal development? "Do you want to change our relationship?" he asked, words spilling from his lips with urgency. "Because I'm willing to do the work, Emily, whatever it takes." She narrowed her eyes, as if searching for any hint of insincerity, but there it was. He wasn't merely throwing empty words into the void. This time, he was determined to follow through with action. "Prove it," she replied, the challenge igniting the tension once more. "Be there for me. Show up in ways that matter. Make the effort to learn my interests, understand my struggles. This isn't going to be a quick fix." His heart swelled with the enormity of what lay before him, a chance at true fatherhood. What if his professional expertise and relentless drive for success could translate into the commitment to reconnect? He took a moment to absorb her challenge, the possibilities of his transformation beginning to crystallize. "I will, Emily. I'll put my career on the back burner if that's what it takes. Let's start anew." As her guarded facade began to thaw, she seemed to reconsider him, weighing the sincerity of his plea against the pain of the past. In that moment, a door opened, not just to healing, but to fresh beginnings as well. It was a bold declaration, one neither of them could take lightly. And deep down, Jacob questioned whether he would possess the fortitude for the changes that lay ahead. Because the truth loomed larger than ever. Rebuilding their relationship would demand more than just words. It required him to confront his darkest anxieties about self-worth and vulnerability. But as they locked eyes, Jacob felt a flickering flame of hope ignite within him, bold enough to spur him forward, but fragile enough to be extinguished by doubt. Facing this pivotal crossing, he realized he needed to lay bare his own fears if he truly wished to claim the role of father again. Could he embrace the vulnerability this journey demanded? That haunting question lingered in his mind as Emily's gaze softened, signaling a fragile but hopeful path ahead. As this new chapter unfolded, would he find the courage to face not just the reconciliation? The answers were waiting just out of himself he had long neglected. The answers were waiting just out of reach, promising a storm of revelations ahead. Jacob stood outside the cafe where he had agreed to meet Emily again. The weight of their previous conversation lingered in the depths of his mind, twisting his stomach in knots. He could almost sense the pulse of his own heart, echoing his determination and fear. Today wasn't just about coffee. It was about taking the first step towards a transformation he desperately desired. As he entered the cafe, the familiar aroma of roasted coffee beans washed over him, but today it felt more like a stifling fog. He scanned the small space, hoping to catch a glimpse of her. When he finally spotted Emily at a corner table, he felt a surge of adrenaline. She sat there, absorbed in her thoughts, a stark embodiment of courage and resilience. Smoothing his palms against his trousers, Jacob approached her with a sense of gravity. "Hey," he said, a slight tremor in his voice. Emily looked up, her expression cautious. "Hi." As he settled into the chair opposite her, he could see a trace of uncertainty reflected in her eyes. It mirrored his own internal struggle. He had made promises, but now had to prove their authenticity. "I've been thinking about what you said," he began, trying to project sincerity. "About proving it?" she interjected swiftly, lips forming a tight line. "Words are just words, Jacob." He exhaled slowly, contemplating the churning thoughts in his head. "I know, but I've made a list. Activities or interests you enjoy, things we could do together." Her brow raised slightly, skepticism clinging to her demeanor. "Like what?" "I read that you love painting. What if we start there? I could spend a Saturday with you at a painting class. Or, if you prefer something else," he hesitated, "whatever it is, I want to be involved." For a moment, silence hung between them like a taut wire, threatening to snap. Then she leaned back, arms crossed, a defensive posture. "You cannot schedule a relationship, Jacob. It's not that simple." He felt the sting of her words, a sharp reminder of the complex dance they were attempting. "You're right. I guess I've always relied on checklists and metrics. It's how I operate in business. I just thought—" "Thought what?" she challenged him, a hint of anger flaring up again. "That you could fix things with a few golden gestures and call it a day?" Her fierce honesty was both refreshing and intimidating. Still, he pressed forward. "No, I want to earn your trust. I know it's going to take more than a couple of outings. Can you tell me what else you need from me?" Emily uncrossed her arms, visibly wrestling with her emotions. This was more than just a simple act of spending time together. Trust was a fortress, built over years but quickly eroded. Still, she paused, the internal battle evident on her face. "Understand that I am not that little girl anymore," she finally said. "I won't accept hollow efforts." Jacob nodded, aligning himself with her perspective, sensing an opening for deeper conversations. What she truly wanted was a commitment to listening, learning, and evolving together. "What do you need to feel supported?" he asked quietly, wanting to tailor his approach to her specific needs. "There's a lot I want to share, but it's going to take time. You have to meet me halfway." He leaned forward, sincerity fueling the urgency in his voice. "I'm ready to do that. All I need is guidance. If I falter, call me out on it." Just then, a group of young artists entered the cafe, their laughter ringing out with an infectious energy. Jacob instinctively glanced over his shoulder, then turned back to Emily, who had followed his gaze. "See," she said, acknowledging the vibrant energy. "This is the world I've immersed myself in, the world I found in your absence." "What do you mean?" "The arts have given me a voice, a way to express the things I struggled to articulate as a child. Now you want to join in on something you've never understood." She had struck a nerve. He didn't just want to join in. He wanted to grasp the intricacies of her world. "Teach me," he urged. "I may not know anything about art, but I want to learn the language." For a flicker of a moment, Emily's tension unraveled slightly. She searched his eyes for sincerity, perhaps gauging whether he was finally ready to put aside his professional persona and enter her world. "All right," she said, her voice softer but still cautious. "But you have to accept that vulnerability is part of this journey, and it will make you uncomfortable." Jacob hardly knew what he felt. Anticipation mixed with trepidation coursed through him, and he realized he was prepared to bare himself, step out of his corporate steadiness into the chaos of artistry and emotion. "You'll see me at my worst," she whispered, vulnerability surfacing. "But that's where we both start." Their eyes locked, and in that brief exchange, something shifted. A fragile bridge began to form, connecting their vastly different worlds. But the foundation felt precarious, and Jacob sensed that one misstep could send everything tumbling down again. As they deliberated their next steps, the weight of the past loomed, ever present, a silent reminder of what lay at stake. Jacob understood that Emily deserved more than just a promise. She deserved action, consistent, tangible efforts to close the gap he had created. The stakes had never been higher, and with his heart racing again, he pondered the hardest question that he still had to answer. Would he have the courage to face the discomfort ahead? Saying, "I'm ready," isn't enough, Jacob. You must prove it, not just today, but every day, she cautioned, raising the stakes of the challenge she had laid before him. With uncertainty, nestled beside determination, he replied, "I will prove it to you. I will commit to this, to us. I don't just want a relationship, I want to earn the right to be your father again." As the conversation shifted, the cafe buzzed around them, oblivious to the magnitude of their exchange. Jacob marveled at how he was walking this tightrope. The obstacles ahead loomed large, but for once he felt ready to confront them all. Yet, lurking just beneath the surface of his newfound resolve lay another question, one he'd have to wrestle with soon enough. How would he handle the perceptions of others, or worse, the internal conflict of his own inadequacies, as he embarked on this uncharted path? A storm of self-discovery and emotional challenges awaited him, answering only his willingness to engage deeply with both his daughter and himself. Would he have the courage to meet each challenge head-on? The journey promised answers he was both enthusiastic and terrified to confront. Jacob emerged from the cafe, buoyed by the promise of potential, yet weighed down by the gravity of his choices. The discussion with Emily marked not just a pivotal moment in their relationship, but a fundamental transformation in him. He had sought to bridge the gap that years of neglect had carved, and while the path ahead appeared fraught with challenges, he felt reconnecting with his daughter ignited a new spark within him. Over the following weeks, Jacob embraced the lessons he had learned in that small cafe. He cultivated a new rhythm, one dedicated to not just pursuing business success, but also to nurturing genuine relationships. Painting classes became a weekly ritual, filled with awkward brushes and vivid colors, each stroke a reminder that art mirrored life, messy yet beautiful in its imperfections. Emily watched as he clumsily mixed colors, chuckling at his initial incompetence, but also appreciating his earnest efforts to step into her world. A profound shift occurred within Jacob. He no longer relied solely on spreadsheets and metrics. Instead, he began to embrace emotional transparency. He kept an open dialogue with Emily, inviting her to share her dreams, fears, and passions. The more she spoke, the deeper their connection grew, challenging the very foundation of his previous identity as a solitary CEO devoid of familial ties. Professionally, Jacob initiated a similar transformation. Following the board meeting where he laid bare his vulnerabilities, he continued to practice openness and empathy within the company. He invited feedback and encouraged every voice to be heard, establishing a culture of collaboration rather than competition. As he nurtured his team, he was met with surprising support that reinforced his belief in the power of vulnerability as a leadership tool. Days turned to weeks, and a particularly defining moment arrived when Jacob received an email inviting him to give a keynote speech at a prominent corporate summit. The theme, the power of authentic leadership, resonated deeply with him. While the old Jacob would have shunned the spotlight, fearing exposure, the new Jacob embraced. He recognized that sharing his journey could inspire others grappling with similar battles between success and self-discovery. Standing on that stage, his heart raced, but this time with excitement rather than trepidation. As he spoke of his transformation, his voice grew stronger, fueled by the authentic connections he had cultivated at home and work. True leadership is born from vulnerability, he proclaimed, as he recalled the faces of both Emily and his team who had become a source of strength. It's about acknowledging our imperfections and allowing others to witness our journey. Applause erupted. Tears welled in his eyes, not just from the pride he felt standing before an audience, but from the profound realization that he had finally found his voice, one that embraced openness, connection, and above all, love. Post-speech, as he mingled with guests, Jacob caught sight of Emily in the crowd. She beamed, her presence a tender reminder of how far they had come together. He made his way to her, recognizing the bond they were nurturing was built on authenticity, love, and unwavering commitment. Gazing into her eyes, Jacob felt immense gratitude swell within him. "I couldn't have done this without you," he confessed, marveling at how their journey had intertwined. "Thank you for guiding me back to myself." Emily smiled, a depth of understanding reflected in her expression. "You're finally here, and that's what matters. This is just the beginning." In that moment, Jacob understood that personal achievement wasn't measured solely by wealth or accolades. It was quantified by the connections he fostered and the love he embraced. He had transformed from a lonely CEO, deprived of joy, to a fulfilled father, recognized not just for his business acumen, but for his authenticity. He had accomplished what once seemed insurmountable. He had conquered the barriers of isolation that had defined him for so long. With newfound confidence and competence, Jacob stood resolute, knowing he could weather whatever storms lay ahead, both in business and in his personal life. The journey of transformation awaited him still, a story not just of him, but of every person yearning for connection and understanding. Now, in the spirit of this shared journey, you need to subscribe immediately to the channel. Don't miss out on exclusive emotional stories that inspire change and growth. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and ensure more heartfelt narratives reach those who need them most. Comment with your reactions and theories about Jacob's incredible transformation. The conversation starts with you. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Real breakthroughs begin when we share our stories and insights with those around us.